Welcome, and I would like to dedicate this lesson in the memory of the victims of that firestorm in Maui, and pray that God will bring healing to people, but certainly to all who are ill and suffering from illness. May God bring light and healing to them all. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And let me make sure I have, yep, okay. Today's Parsha, this week's Parsha, Ki Tavo, as you can see right over here. And this is one of the two Parshiot in the Torah that have curses. And in fact, we are in the midst of these curses. The other Parsha is at the end of the last Parsha of the book of Leviticus, in Bechukotai also. There are these series of awful curses that come as a consequence of not being faithful to God and what's involved in that. And I have to say, I'm sure many of us are wondering what is going on in the world today, both in terms of the fact that we are supposed to be stewards of the world. The world does not belong to us. We are here temporary. That's part of the notion of being mortal human beings, that essentially we don't own anything, certainly not in perpetuity. And if you don't, then essentially you're a renter and need to take care of the owner's property. And that's our attitude about that, about our bodies, about everything. That's the role we play. And whether or not we actually play that role or actually doing it, there are consequences for it, and these are mentioned here. And sadly, of course, the tragedy of the story in the Bible is that we don't pay attention, we don't learn lessons, and as a result, these curses actually come about, and they're pretty awful when you think about them and that they are happening. So, at any rate, here we go. Veheshiv b'cha, this is a continuation. Moses is telling them, this is God, will bring upon you et kol madvei Mitzrayim. Madvei is something like the suffering, something like that. Devai, all the sufferings of Egypt. Asher yagortem mipnehem, of which you were terrified, you were fearful on their account. V'davku vach, and they will attach themselves to you. And we have a Rashi on this. So, what are we referring to? Asher yagorta mipnehem, which you yourselves feared. Mipnei hamakot. We're talking about the plagues of Egypt that God brought in the process of redeeming the Israelites from slavery, right? Keshahayu Yisrael ro'im makot meshunot, when the Israelites saw the strange, the weird plagues, right? Habaot al Mitzrayim, that came upon Egypt, hayu yireim me'im, they were fearful of them. Shelo yavu, what was their fear? Shelo yavu gam aleihem, that it wouldn't happen to them as well, that they themselves wouldn't have to face these plagues. Teda, you should know. Shekain katuv, it says elsewhere, Shmot Tetvav, in the 15th chapter of the book of Exodus, Vahaya im shamo, it says, and behold, if you hearken, if you perform the mitzvot, if you fulfill these commandments, goes on to say, Kol hamachaleh, all the illness, asher samti b'mitzrayim, which I placed in Egypt, lo asim alecha, I shall not place upon you. You will be spared those particular afflictions. It makes a point, Rashi makes a point here. Ein mi'arin et ha'adam. You don't threaten a person, you don't frighten a person, right? Ela b'davar shehu yagor mimenu, except from something from which he is frightened. You don't frighten someone if they're not frightened with that, or you can't threaten them if they're not afraid of that particular consequence. So that's the point. They saw these plagues, the Israelites saw these plagues, and they were terrified lest they come upon them. Gam kol choli, also all illness, the whole makah, and again, a makah is like to strike against, right? Asher lo katuv b'sefer haTorah zot, that which isn't even written in this Torah scroll. Diseases that aren't even mentioned here. Ya'alem Hashem alecha, Hashem will bring upon you ad hishamdach, until you are destroyed. Until they destroy you, or you are destroyed. I'm struggling to give an accurate translation given the grammatical form of this, but it appears, I would say, to be in a passive form until you are destroyed. Ya'alem. So it's sort of a strange word, right? He says Lashon Aliyah. It has the meaning of bringing up, bringing over them. Next one. V'nishartem mimitei ba'at. By the way, look at this. We're already on verse 62. We've been going through this material. V'nishartem mimitei ba'at, and you will remain small, few in number. Tachat asher hiyitem, given, I'm trying again to find a translation that carries the meaning of this, right? But tachat asher yitem, in the place that you were, kechochvei hashamayim larov, like the stars of heaven in multitude. Ki lo shamata, because you have not hearkened, bekol Hashem Elohecha, to the voice of the Lord your God. So, we'll keep going, and then I will try and see if we can comment on that. Right, so you shall remain few in numbers in place of mu'atem chiluf merubin. He says, small in the place of numerous. So he's just explaining the expression here, tachat asher. V'haya ka'asher sas Hashem alechem lehetiv lachem, and it shall be that just as God was delighted, Hashem was delighted regarding you, to do well by you, ulaharbot etchem, and to cause you to multiply. Ken yasis Hashem alechem, so God will rejoice over you. Laha'avid etchem, to lay you waste, ulahashmid etchem, and to destroy you. V'nisachtem, and you will be torn away, me'al ha'adama, from off the land, asher ataba shama lishta, which you are coming there to inherit. So even before they set foot in the land, Moses is warning them that there is a condition involved in this. Now, the idea of God being glad, taking joy in destroying us, is a problem. It's an awful thought, and so we modify it a little bit and explain. Right? Kain yasis Hashem, so God will rejoice. And this is based on the Talmud Megillah 10, right? The tractate Megillah. Et oivechem alechem. In other words, he will cause your enemies to rejoice over you, lahavid, to destroy you. So it's not that God is rejoicing, but that God is causing the enemies to rejoice. Maybe not a great difference, but I certainly think that it doesn't suggest, at least, that the divine is rejoicing seeing people suffer. V'nisachtem, again, an unusual word, lashon akira. Rashi tells us it has the meaning, the connotation of uprooting. V'chein, and so we have a verse in Proverbs, this is Proverbs 15, Beit Geim, the house of the proud, the house of the haughty, Isach Hashem, God will uproot. Right? Context there. We're going to get to the end of this. I mean, we're really far into this. Ve'hefitzcha Hashem b'chol ha'amim, and Hashem will scatter you amongst all the nations, miktzeh haaretz, from one end of the earth, v'ad ktzeh haaretz, and to the other end of the earth, v'avadata sham Elohim acherim, and there you will serve other gods, asher lo yadata, of which you have no knowledge, atav avotecha, that is, you and your ancestors have no knowledge of them, eitz va'even, of wood and stone. So here we go. V'avadat Hashem Elohim acherim. So Rashi says here, ketargumo, as the Targum translates it. Okay, so let's see. Here's how he translates it. V'tiflach tama, you shall serve there the amamaya, to nations, palche ta'avata, okay, who serve, right, who worship, serve the abominations, di lo yadata at v'avahatach, which you and your ancestors never knew about. So it's not that you're going to worship those idols, but you're going to serve the people who worship those idols, and it's tantamount as if you're serving yourself, because you're aiding and abetting them. Right? So he says, Ketargumo, just as Onkelos interprets it in the Aramaic. Lo avodat elahut mamash, we're not talking about literally idol worship, ela ma'alim mas, but you will have to pay a tax, v'gulgaliyot, and poll tax, lechomrei avodat kochavim, to the priests of that idol. Uvagoyim hahem lo targia, and in amongst those nations you shall have no rest. V'lo yeh manoach achaf raglecha, nor will there be any, again from menucha, right? There'll be no rest for the sole of your foot. V'natan Hashem lacha sham lev ragaz, and God will put a heart, give you there a heart, ragaz, like stressed, always concerned, that kind of thing. V'chilyon einayim, and eyes that are being dimmed, v'da'avon nefesh, and da'avon nefesh would be, just great anxiety and emotional pain. That's how you're going to feel there. And I will say that when I was reading the novel Ivanhoe and seeing how Walter Scott describes how Jews are being treated in England by the population, this verse really comes to mind, how they're treated. So they're despised, they're treated cruelly, they're taken advantage of, and that kind of thing. So onwards with let's see what we got. Okay, Lord Targia. So Rashi's now helping us with the Hebrew. Lord Tanuach, you shall not rest. Kamo v'zot hamarga'a, hamarge'a. And this is the rest in Isaiah. Lev, let's see, was it Lev Rogez? I just want to make sure. Lev Ragaz, right? So it says Lev Hared, a heart that is trembling. Ketargumo Dachil, right? So Dachil is the Aramaic word that means to tremble, right? Kamo Sheol mitachat ragza lach. So I am going to have to look So Sheol, possibly referring to Hades. This must be in Isaiah too. So, Hades below Ragzalach trembles, right? Is shaking to you, making you shake. And in Exodus chapter 15, Shim'u Amim Yirgazun, this is from the Song of the Red Sea. Here, Sham'u Amim, nations have heard, Yirgazun, they tremble. And Samuel, so he's finding all these references to Ragaz, right? Second book of Samuel, chapter 22, Mostot Hashamayim Yirgazun. This is, I believe, from the Song of Triumph of King David. It's like Psalm 18, but it's parallel in book of Samuel. The foundations of the heavens, right, are tremble. The Chilyon Einayim, right, eyes that are come to an end. Metzapeh Lishua. So what this is a metaphoric expression of hoping for salvation, Ve'lo Tavo, but it will not come. So in other words, hopes that are dashed, that you're seeking, right, your eyes seeking the salvation, seeking help, seeking comfort, and it not coming. And that's how the Hebrew describes it. The uvagoyim, okay, we had that. All right, going on, so sorry. V'hayu chayecha tluim, your lives will hang, will be suspended, lacha mineged, for you opposite. Ufachadata laila v'yomam, you shall be in fear night and day. V'lo ta'amim b'chayecha, you will not have any confidence in your life, in your staying alive. At least that's how I would understand it. Okay. So, chayecha tluim lach, your lives are suspended before you. Al hasafek, in other words, the suspense, right? Interesting. In other words, in doubt. You just don't know if you're going to make it from day to day. Kol safek karui talui. Any situation of doubt is referenced as hanging, pending, right? Hanging. Shema amut hayom b'cherev haba'a aleinu. Maybe, so what's the suspense? Possibly, it's possible, I will die today with the sword that is coming upon us. So you look at what goes on in war-torn countries where you're not sure whether you're going to make it to the end of the day because of the situation, right? And Menachot Kuf Gimel, Tractate Menachot, page 103, the Rabbatenu Darshu, and our rabbis interpret this. They make a midrash, example, Ze halokech tvu'a min hashuk. This refers to one who is taking produce from the market. So possibly it's talking about whether or not you're going to have food to eat, right? I'm thinking that's what it means. V'lo ta'amin b'chayecha, you shall have no confidence in your lives. Zehu samlech al hapaltar. This refers to someone who relies on the baker, and I think a paltar may refer to a non-Jewish baker. So he doesn't even know if he's going to have bread. Baboker tomar, in the morning you will say, mi ten erev, would it were evening already. Can't wait for evening. Uva erev tomar, and in the evening you're going to either, again, remember we got this word amar, which we said can sometimes refer to thinking, right? You're going to think, mi ten boker, were it not already morning. I wish it were already morning. Mi pachat levavcha, from the fear in your heart, asher tivcha, which you will fear, mi mar'e einecha, and from the sight of your eyes, what your eyes are seeing, asher ter'eh, which you see. And of course, you think of people seeing things that are just so awful, and the terrible results it has on their lives, that it affects them so psychologically, right? PTSD is from these kinds of experiences. Boker Tomar Mi Ten Erev, in the morning you will think, I wish it were already evening, right? Veya Erev Shel Emesh. And he's in according to Sota, right? So I'm Emesh means the night before. In other words, you wish it were the evening of the night before, is what it's sounding like to me, right? The evening. In other words, maybe because you know you made it to now and that you were okay, that it was actually yesterday evening. Ova'erev tomar miyiten boker, and then evening you're going to say, would it were morning, shel shacharit, right? In other words, you wish it were this morning when you get to the evening. Shehatzarut mitchazkot, because the troubles get worse. Tamid, constantly, v'chol sha'a meruba kilalta umishelafanecha kilalata, and every hour, every moment, its curses are more numerous than the hour that was before. In other words, things are getting progressively worse and worse and worse. So we're almost at the end of this. Thank God, right? So just want to make sure I'm covered everything. Yep. Onwards. V'heshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim ba'oniyot. God will cause you to return to Egypt in ships. B'derech asher amarti lach, in the way regarding which I said to you, lo tosif od lirota, you shall not ever see it again. V'hitmakartem sham lo'ovecha, and there you will be sold to your enemies, la'avadim v'lishvachot, as slaves and maidservants, v'ein koneh, with none to purchase. In other words, you'll be so devalued that people aren't even going to want to buy you as slaves. Oniot, in ships, bisfinot, bishivya. I'm sure is what this is, okay? So he's saying in laden, like slave ships. There you will be sold to your enemies. Atem mevakshim liyot mimkapkim lahem. You're actually going to ask, you're going to request to be sold to them, la'avadim ulishvachot, as slaves and maidservants. In other words, living by yourselves is worse than becoming slaves and maidservants in the homes of your enemies. Ve'ein koneh, none to purchase, ki yigzaru alecha hereg v'chilayon. Why none to purchase? Because they will decree on you to be killed and wiped out. So you're not gonna get sold. You're gonna be wiped out. And unfortunately, this has in fact been the case over history. V'hit makartem. So he says, belaz in French or Old French. So if for this sounds like, well, for I don't know how to even read this word. Vu maybe is what this is, right? And here's the Yiddish, werden eich wellen. So you yourselves will wish, wollen verkaufen, that you were sold. You yourselves would like to be bought. V'lo yitachen lefaresh v'itmaken. And again, Rashi is trying to explain that the I believe the original translation I gave is probably the incorrect translation as Rashi is analyzing this word, right? You cannot explain this word, v'hit makartem, right? And you will, because it's a hitpael, which means it's reflexive. So it means you will want to be sold. You will sell yourselves, something like that. Belashon v'nim kartem. You can't explain it as meaning you will be sold, which is how I believe I translated it before. So look, Rashi is helping me. Al yedei mochrim, right? That you will be sold by means of sellers, acherim, of other sellers, mipnei shene'emar acharav ve'ein koneh, because afterwards it says there is none to buy. So in other words, it makes total sense to understand this as a reflexive verb, meaning you will want to sell yourselves and no one will buy you. I think we're at the last verse of the curses. Ele divrei habrit. These are the words of the covenant. Asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, which Hashem commanded Moses, lichrot, to establish, to cut, literally it means, right? Et bnei Israel, with the children of Israel, the Eretz Moav, in the land of Moab, milvad habrit, over and above the covenant, asher karati tam bechorev, the covenant which he established with them at Chorev, meaning at Sinai. So at Sinai we know that God made a covenant with the specifics of the Torah, that the Jewish people, the Israelites, should accept and practice the Torah. And there's this second covenant here where God says, this is like sealing the covenant and saying, this is the agreement I have with you. Because before we started all this, we actually had blessings before the curses were mentioned. So I'm going to put in a mark here. And with God's help, we have finished the curses, and we will see this. We are to the next chapter, and I'm very grateful for that we were able to get through all of this. So I'm going to stop the share. All right. This is ear tingling. But you know something?
I don't know. Did we ever fall to the whole point of selling ourselves into slavery?
You know,
in history. I don't know if that's been a thing yet.
Well, I don't know. Certainly, you know, we certainly were in servitude. There's no question about that.
You said about Rabbi.
Yeah.
You said about England.
Say that again.
How they're treated, the Israelites are treated in England. What
Yes.
about the United States for how we're treated here?
I don't think you can make any comparison. The fact that we have members of Congress who are Jewish and in state government, etc., the fact is that we're in a way in a golden age. Okay?
There's still anti-Semitism here.
Yes, but you can't compare it. If you read that book, you will see that the average conversation, right? When you go and talk to a non-Jew, do they treat you as if you're worse than dirt, Harlan? Is that the average conversation you're going to have?
Not usually.
No, I don't think so.
Harlan, do you realize that he was talking about
I'm talking about England now. I'm talking about England back at the time of the Battle of Hastings in 1060.
Right. Well, it's later
England
than
now.
that. We're trying to get Richard back.
Right.
Richard the Lionheart. Yeah.
We're trying to get. That's the time that we're talking about.
Right.
It's when the Normans conquered the Saxons, and there's bitter feeling between the two peoples at the time. That's part of what this book describes, but it also describes how both Normans and Saxons treated Jews.
My husband is actually related all the way back to John.
Huh.
That John.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not a good.
And then further back to Eleanor of Aquitaine, and then back further.
So
because luckily, he can do that. I mean, we can't. Yeah.
That is pretty amazing. Let me comment a little bit, if I may, on the curses. So I have, obviously it's soul searching, right? And soul searing. So first of all, there's a point that the rabbis make, which I think is so good, that the very fact that Moses is warning them means there's hope. You don't warn a person if there's no hope at all. You simply palliate them, okay? And they give the example of the doctor giving strong medicine to a patient if he thinks there's a chance that the patient will be cured. But if the doctor doesn't think that the patient has any chance of being cured, they're not going to bother giving them medicines that may be painful or otherwise possibly harmful, etc., unless there's that possibility of a cure. And so we have to understand that as terrible as these curses are, they're being given in the hopes that people are going to pay attention. All right. I mean, look at what we're going through now with global warming. And it's like there are people who just don't want to pay attention. But on the other hand, knowing what's going on, if we were to pay attention, and some people, thank God, are, we possibly could prevent it from happening. So there is a lot to be said about what we're going through here and trying to reach out to people where they are. So I'm going to stop the recording now.